Gonsalves.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My dear friend, President of Anali, my brother, Prime Minister Rowley, and Ivan Duque, former President of the Republic of Colombia, my ancient warrior, Bara Jagdeo, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I, first of all, have to join the chairman in wishing all the ladies a magnificent Valentine's Day. I don't know how many of the men this morning told their ladies Happy Valentine's Day. I got up very early to put some money in the matrimonial bank by putting the record straight with Eloise. She had asked me to convey to her friend orphan, why did you have to take Ralph away from me on Valentine's Day? But she understands. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, nor bends with the remover to remove. Oh no. It is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. That is for the ladies today. That's not me. That's my very old friend William Shakespeare in one of his sonnets. We heard this morning, thus far, 3 excellent presentations. And I'm hoping to add value to the discussion by adopting everything which has been said and call what has been said my own, so that we can cast in it a little wider in addressing harnessing energy for development. It's not just harnessing energy for energy's harnessing sake, but it is to do something, not only to make our economies grow, but for our societies to develop. Guyana is at a very special location, particular crossroads, a particular juncture. Indeed, we all in the Caribbean, if we are honest, would say, as the psalmist said, the stone that the builder rejected has now become the head cornerstone. Not too long ago, there was a special bench at several airports in the Caribbean as the Guyanese, especially the Guyanese women, moving hither and thither to conduct their trade and teaching Caribbean people out of an absolute necessity how to trade and how to make a life and a living out of struggle. And there's a very interesting poem by a Mexican poet laureate, Octavio Paz, in a poem entitled Release, and these are among the words. Beneath the rain of drums, the flute's black stalk grew, withered, and sprouted again. Things cast off from their names, I flowed at my body's edge among the unbounded elements. Before Guyana grew, people used to come here, including Vincentians and Bajans and Trinidadians and others. And for a while it withered. It is now sprouting again. And how is it doing so? Where the people are flowing at their body's edge, to the extremities of their possibilities, despite limitations, among the unbounded elements, the elements for which there are no boundaries. The only boundaries are those we set ourselves, the boundaries of our imagination. With this newfound oil wealth, Guyana has embarked from our observation on the building of a modern, competitive, many-sided, post-colonial economy, which is at once local, national, regional, and global. In this exercise of harnessing the energy for development, there's an interface between the individual, the market, the state, the region, and the world. A society which consists only of atomized individuals, or largely of atomized individuals. That is to say, individuals who see themselves and are seen as atoms, separate and distinct from every other one, to be manipulated metaphorically in the laboratory. Such an individualistic society is not sustainable. So we have to replace or to avoid that rank individualism, that atomized individualism, with the idea of a social individual. The market is important for the production of goods and services, but the market has shown itself historically and in the contemporary sense inadequate to address issues, critical issues like redistributive justice and environmental sustainability. The state cannot create families. The state can interface with the market to do things on behalf of the collective in solidarity, which the market itself cannot do. And I'm sure the oil companies understand that. And if they don't, they, I suspect, will have a challenge with the government and people of Guyana. Because oil in some countries have been a blessing and in some a curse. And the avoidance of it being a curse The market has to recognize the legitimate role of the state in addressing redistributive justice and regulating matters for environmental sustainability. The region is vital for Guyana. Guyana, though it has large continental landmass, it is, in profound ways, a seaboard civilization. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, we are part of what you may call island civilization. And the seaboard civilization, like the island civilization, they are peculiar civilizations. And given the nature of a seaboard or an island civilization, when we are in them, we tend to look inwards. But at the same time, accompanying that inward look, there must be necessarily an outward gaze. And the dialectic between the inward look and the outward gaze is important to resolve. And it can only be resolved if you go to your neighbors in the region, whether it's in the Caribbean, and that is an important connection, or in Latin America. And as Ivan Duque has pointed out, there are two sets of factors touching and concerning regional integration. There are those factors which induce us to integration. The things of the moment to create development, jobs, lift our societies. But before what induces us, there are a set of circumstances which predispose us. And those which predispose us are, of course, those arising from our common history, our culture, our geographical closeness, our geographical propinquity. And successive Guyanese governments have made it a centerpiece of public policy for regional integration. And I've seen from this government in Guyana a concept of integration which is, I believe, one which holds great promise for our region and for Guyana to play an important role in the leadership of that integration movement. The integration movement can either be mechanistic or it can be organic. It's organic as it is being proposed by the government of Guyana, that the units, the strengths and weaknesses of the units, the possibilities and limitations are dissolved into the whole, so that at the end of the day, the whole becomes more than a summation of the individual parts. In that integration, it does not mean that all the units will advance at the same pace or to the same extent. But they must not be unequally yoked in the outcomes where one set of units do not advance and others advance at their expense. And I think the approach of Guyana, including with the issue of food security, and I'll come to that shortly, and the linkage with development, we have a great promise. And the CSME is an important platform. And when we go to the Bahamas on Wednesday, issues connected there too, and issues touching and concerning energy will also be addressed. And then, of course, there is the world. We are not isolated from what is happening in the world, and cannot be. And the existential issue of our times is that touching and concerning climate change. And we talk pretty much all the time about the discussion relating to one international convention, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. But there are two other companion ones which we must always pay attention to. The Convention on Biodiversity and the International Convention on Desertification, Droughts, and Land Degradation. And all of them are connected. Now, the issue of how do we address climate change is very complicated, and how to make the transition. For example, and they have been raised before, and we have to be very straight and upfront with them. Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Vincent and Grenadines, the Caribbean, we contribute very little to global warming. That's a fact, demonstrated. Countries before have developed on the basis of extracting resources from the region, committed crimes of native genocide and the enslavement of African bodies, imposed indentureship, had development untrammeled, essentially unregulated. And the generations subsequently, and certainly in the contemporary period, have realized that large sections in North America, in Europe, say, look, we're leading the world to damnation. And they said, okay, at Paris in 2015, we will seek to have the increase in temperatures no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And there are many commitments which were made in Paris and subsequently. For example, recently at Sharm el-Sheikh, they set up a fund in relation to loss and damage. But they say we are setting up this fund, but we're not putting any money in it. Well, a fund without money is an oxymoron. Or one humorist in St. Vincent and Grenadines said to me, no, when you set up a fund and you don't put any money in it, you take off the D and it's fun. That's what this thing is about. And they say to countries like Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago, and Prime Minister Rowley addressed this. And he addressed it with many statistics, and I'm not going to repeat those. That's why I say I want to add value and to pull out what he said. They say, well, we're reducing, you have to reduce emissions by 45% by 2030, net zero by 2050, as my brother Ivan so scholarly and persuasively presented the arguments. So what do you want to do? You want Guyana to leave the oil and gas in the ground? You can't. And at the first moment you have a problem with the war in Ukraine, you start to ramp up your coal. You start to pollute more. You say, well, this is a moment of your necessity. Guyana is saying what I'm doing is not just necessary, it's desirable, because simultaneously Guyana is ensuring that it doesn't trouble its forests. And even with the growing oil and gas industry in Guyana, it is on target with the balance that Ivan was speaking about to get to some of these targets, while at the same time the developed countries and some emerging ones have had an earlier stage of industrialization and polluted the world. So this is a battle which we will have to fight in this contemporary period. Leadership is therefore critical. Men and women make history, but only to the extent that the circumstances of history permit them so to make. They do not make history in circumstances chosen by themselves. They are where they are. But part of those circumstances are ideas which are in the heads of men and women, which oftentimes weigh like a nightmare on the brain. And those who currently exercise power in the global economy, their nightmare surrounds the question, make no mistake about it, as to how can we maintain our hegemony while we're talking about net zero. I hear the leaders of the United States of America, of China and Russia say they want a new world. And I agree with that. Must have a better world. But I pose these questions for all powerful countries which want a new world order. That's how they put it. I ask the following questions. What's new? Which world, and who gives the orders? Those are enduring issues of our times. You know, often it's teasing me last evening and this morning too with Keith. He said I came to Guyana and quoted for him the book of Chronicles. And I'll repeat the quotation that I told him because it concerns leadership. In the book of Chronicles, there is an identification of what each of the leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel were doing and what was their individual focus. And one of the less known leaders from one of the less known tribes of the 12 tribes of Israel was Issachar, Issachar. And all the book of Chronicles says in relation to him, Keith, Issachar knew the times and he acted accordingly. So we have to know the times. And we have to know the times in which we are redefining the interrelationship between the individual, the market, the state, the region, and the world. What are some of the immediate, you go around the Caribbean and talk about the developmental challenges which we have. One of them is crime and citizen insecurity. In every country or in the region, we have this problem. How can we harness oil, harness energy to deal with that? Well, it helps to provide resources. But if we think that resources alone can fight crime and insecurity, we're fooling ourselves. That's why I start with the individual. And I said the state can't create families. I began with that when I'm talking about the state. And I did so for a reason, because I wanted to come to this issue. The persons who are listening to me in this audience and those further afield, as a family, you can't not inculcate certain values in your children, in the young, in your home. Especially young males, because young males are those who are committing most of the crimes and most of the serious ones. You can't wait until that boy is 14 or 15 and then you say you can't do anything with him. You say it's Keith problem, it's Irfan problem, it's Ralph problem. Well, it's all of our problem. And we need for parents to be able to address that. Whether you have oil money or you don't have oil money. Oil money can help to provide support services and mechanisms, but you have to teach, and the young people have to know that they have to take advantage of the opportunities in education, in training. And the mothers and fathers have to understand their own responsibilities there. The state can do certain things, but you can't be an atomized individual and go about your own business. No, it's not going to work. This is why we have to do this frank and honest reassessment as to where we are and where we are going. We must know the times and we must act accordingly. Then, the schools have their role to play. And we are finding a lot of the teachers, by and large, doing a pretty okay job. But A lot of teachers getting a lot of certificates, a lot of degrees, but somehow not building the critical faculties in the students, and they become receptacles for facts rather than critical minds receiving and transmitting universal culture, but with a Caribbean particularity. And we have good, tried and tested values in our civilization, our Caribbean civilization. And then, the United States of America, we don't produce the guns, we don't produce the bullets. The government of Trinidad and Tobago led at the United Nations for the acceptance of a treaty, and there's a treaty which we all sign on arms. Government of St. Vincent and Grenadines assisted the government of Trinidad and Tobago to prevent or reduce the export of arms. Small arms, but also small arms defined also as the A-40s and the M16s. It hasn't seen the flow of the US Senate because of their love for arms in the United States of America. We have to address that as part of our interface with the world. That's one of our developmental issues. How are we going to control serious crime in our region? The oil money will help us to buy more police equipment, train them better, give them more vehicles, have more police officers, all of that. But police work is not the cause of crime or causes of crimes. If you look, young males who don't get proper education, who drop out of school, the families don't pay attention to them, the churches don't do their work, because a lot of churches now do good work, but many of them, they have become places of entertainment. How many times you don't hear them shouting, church, make some noise. I hear that when I go to listen to a Masha Montano concert. And then a little after, they will say, as an afterthought, make some noise for the Lord. So we have a number of things. The oil money can help us to fix certain things and to provide the infrastructure and the support services. But if all the oil money going to do is to make us buy more cars from Japan and buy them very cheap, so we clog up the roads, because Japan has decided that by the year 2030, most of their vehicles are going to be either electrical vehicles or hybrid vehicles. So they're dumping their second-hand vehicles very cheaply. In Trinidad, in Guyana, in St. Vincent, in Colombia. That's an issue. That's an energy issue too. But we have to handle that with our population. And if you dare to say that you put in some restrictions in our competitive political system You get the blowback. Keith don't want poor people to buy a car. He drive a big one because he's prime minister. That's where the parochial discussion takes place. That's a developmental issue. So I want to bring us to some real things. So if you make the money and you buy all the cars, you buy the cars. This morning the president said that he was a little late because he couldn't get through the traffic in Georgetown. I say, but you don't have presidential powers. Clear the traffic and be on time. Of course, he's a very accommodating president, so he'd prefer to wait in the queue with everybody else. If you're going to use the money to import a lot of things which are useless, and food, which is making us undernourished, and worse than undernourished, obese. In the Caribbean, the report has just come out. In Latin America and the Caribbean, food security and nutrition. I want everybody to read it. It says, throughout the Caribbean and Latin America, there has been a slippage because of COVID and climate change issues concerning undernourishment. A few more people, a percentage here or two more undernourished. But the real problem is obesity, including child obesity. So we get the equipment to deal with cardiac arrest. We get all the experts to deal with these matters. But we eating too much food, and we eating the wrong type of food. But close down a KFC. Restrict it. Because it is the obesity, and I can speak to that, because I have been a sinner who has come to redemption. And it is better to have a sinner who has come to redemption speak to this issue than who by nature is self-righteous on the subject. A self-righteous person can't persuade the sinners. But he who has sinned and come to redemption is always a better evangelist. The matter here, what are the main killers? Ivan, you see how I'm bringing this issue which you speak about to real life problems which we have. This region, the main killers, hypertension, diabetes, strokes, cardiac arrest, and cancer. They're all behavioral. Just like the problem of crime is behavioral. But our populations, influenced by other sets of standards and other sets of values, at least sections of them, we're making more money. Our GDP per head is going up. We're keeping people living longer lives because we have better doctors and equipment and so forth, putting pressure on our social security systems. because though we're living longer, we are not living healthier. Leadership, therefore, is critical. We must know the times, and we must act accordingly. I believe I've listened, I've read the speeches of the governments of Guyana, also of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm not saying they're on the right path because they're currently in office. And I don't have any reason to curry favor with them. But in this developmental journey, with this blessing, this opportunity we have with oil and natural gas in Guyana, every single person in Guyana, every single person in the Caribbean, in the families, everybody, the schools, the churches, the community organizations, the media, everybody, we have a role to play. The state can regulate, the state can help with redistributive justice, but the state cannot create families, and families are important for development. Thank you very much.